All right, so you want to know the goddamn truth about James Bond.
The nitty-gritty, the unvarnished story.
Yeah, let's cut the crap and dive headfirst into this motherfucking franchise.
We're talking the books, the movies, the whole goddamn shebang.
And trust me, folks, there's way more to this iconic spy than a shaken martini and a license to kill.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got a dossier here thicker than M's goddamn retirement file.
We've been digging deep.
So buckle up, Buttercup, because shit's about to get real.
What's really fascinating is how this character, just a figment of some ex-spook's imagination, became this global phenomenon.
Right.
Almost an entity separate from those, let's be honest, kind of stuffy novels.
Yeah, Ian Fleming, the dude who birthed Bond, he was ex-military intelligence,
That's
right?
right.
Seems like he ripped off a lot of Bond's personality straight from his own life.
Well, that wouldn't be surprising.
Shitty golf game, love of scrambled eggs. Hell, even the same goddamn toiletries.
Fleming drew heavily from his wartime experiences, the people he knew, the circles he ran in.
Oh, yeah.
His brother, Peter, was knee-deep in covert ops during the war, and there were other figures like Conrad O'Brien French and Duco Popov who likely contributed to Bond's character.
Interesting.
But there's this often overlooked aspect. Fleming's own anxieties about Britain's declining power in the post-war world. They kind of seeped into Bond's missions.
Okay.
You see, Bond became this symbol of British resilience.
Like a fuck you to the rest of the world.
Exactly. This
Yeah.
lone wolf fighting to maintain order in a world teetering on the brink.
So Bond's not just about fast cars and banging broads. He's got this whole geopolitical baggage weighing him down.
Precisely. It adds a layer of complexity to the character that I think often gets lost in the explosions and car chases.
Damn, that's deep, man. Speaking of names, James Bond is kind of blah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not exactly badass for a secret agent.
Right.
It's like naming a Rottweiler Fluffy.
Well, here's where it gets juicy. Fleming actually swiped the name from a freaking bird expert. He saw James Bond on a book about birds of the West Indies and thought it was the most boring, unassuming name imaginable.
You're kidding me.
Nope, he figured a bland name would let the action take center stage.
So the world's most famous spy is named after some bird-watching nerd.
Yeah.
That's fucking hilarious.
It is ironic, right? But it speaks to Fleming's desire to create a character who was, in many ways, a blank slate.
Right.
Bond was meant to be a vessel for the thrills and spills of espionage, not a deep, introspective character.
Well, he nailed that part for sure.
Yes.
Speaking of thrills, Bond's known for his crazy gadgets. That goddamn jetpack, the exploding attaché case.
Oh, yeah, the gadgets.
Makes you wonder if Q Branch is hiring.
The gadgets are pure Bond, evolving with each era. From that practical attaché case in From Russia with Love to the increasingly outlandish devices in later films. They reflect both technological advancements and the changing cultural landscape. But the gadgets also serve a narrative purpose. They're a way for Bond to overcome seemingly impossible odds, to maintain his edge in a world where technology is constantly evolving.
But don't those gadgets sometimes make Bond look like he's relying on toys instead of actual skills?
Good point.
I mean, what the fuck happened to good old-fashioned spycraft?
You've hit a nerve there. Some argue the reliance on gadgets undermines Bond's abilities as a spy, especially in the later films.
Right.
It's a tightrope the franchise has walked from the beginning, balancing the fantasy of super spy tech with the grittier realities of espionage.
Right, and let's not forget the Bond girls.
Ah, yes, the Bond girls.
Beautiful, dangerous, and often with names that sound like they belong on a cocktail menu.
The Bond girl is as integral to the formula as the Martinis and Aston Martins. However, their portrayal has drawn a shit ton of criticism, with many arguing that they're objectified and reduced to eye candy. But it's important to remember that the role of women in the Bond universe has shifted over time.
Yeah.
While the early films were often guilty of portraying women as disposable playthings, later films, particularly those featuring Daniel Craig, have attempted to give the female characters more agency and depth.
Yeah, some of those early Bond flicks are kind of fucked up to watch now.
For sure.
Bond's a total sleazeball in those. But hey, different times.
Different times, for sure.
Okay.
But it's still a valid criticism. The question is whether those early portrayals, even if a product of their era, reinforce harmful stereotypes. It's a conversation that continues to swirl around the franchise.
Yeah, for sure. All right, shifting gears a bit. From what I've read, Fleming wasn't too thrilled about turning his books into comic strips.
Interesting.
Thought it would cheapen his work or some bullshit.
He did. Fleming initially resisted the comic strip adaptation, feeling it wouldn't do his writing justice. But, you know, money talks, and the first strip, Casino Royale, hit the papers in 1958. What's interesting about the comic strip is how it visually reimagined Bond.
Yeah, that comic strip Bond doesn't look anything like suave-ass Connery we see on screen.
Right. The illustrator John McCluskey redesigned Bond, giving him a more rugged, masculine look.
Really?
He felt Fleming's original description was too outdated. It's another example of how Bond's image has been molded and reshaped over time, often to fit the prevailing cultural trends.
So even in comics, Bond got a makeover. Talk about keeping up with the times.
Exactly. And speaking of makeovers, the films themselves have gone through a ton of transformations, reflecting changes in directors, actors, and cultural context. It's like Bond is this constantly evolving entity shaped by the world around him.
Damn straight.
We've had Connery, Lazenby, Moore, Dalton, Brosnan, Craig, each bringing their own flavor to the role.
Yeah.
Each actor has left his mark on Bond, from Connery's raw charisma to Craig's brooding intensity.
It's crazy how they all managed to make it their own while still staying true to the character.
It's a testament to the character's enduring appeal that he can be reinterpreted in so many ways while remaining recognizable as 007.
Yeah.
But it also speaks to the flexibility of the Bond formula. It's a framework that can accommodate a wide range of styles and interpretations, which is one of the reasons it's remained relevant for so long.
Makes sense. And let's not forget those iconic-ass theme songs. Shirley Bassey belting out Goldfinger, McCartney's Live and Let Die, Adele's Skyfall.
Oh, the music.
They're as much a part of the Bond experience as the action.
The music is crucial to the franchise's success. Those theme songs are pop culture gold. And the scores, often blending orchestral arrangements with contemporary sounds, create a distinct soundscape for each film.
For sure.
They heighten the tension, underscore the drama, and add an emotional depth that wouldn't be there otherwise.
Okay, confession time. I suck at video games.
Oh, come on.
But even I've heard of GoldenEye 007 on the Nintendo 64.
Clay?
Apparently, it was a total game changer.
GoldenEye 007 was a landmark title, often cited as one of the greatest video games ever.
Really?
It revolutionized first-person shooters with its innovative gameplay, multiplayer mode, and cinematic presentation.
Wow.
What's interesting is how it took the Bond formula and successfully translated it into an interactive experience. You weren't just watching Bond, you were becoming him.
So even those of us who can't tell a joystick from a martini shaker can appreciate its impact.
Absolutely. GoldenEye 007 proved that Bond could thrive in the interactive realm, paving the way for a slew of other video game adaptations.
Huh. Interesting. But here's a question that's been bugging me. With all the guns, gadgets, and explosions, does anyone take James Bond seriously anymore? Is he anything more than a pop culture fantasy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
While the franchise has been criticized for its unrealistic portrayal of espionage and its reliance on spectacle, it also taps into a deeper fascination with adventure, danger, and that whole secret agent mystique.
So you're saying there's a bit of Bond in all of us?
Maybe.
The desire to be the suave, resourceful hero, saving the day with a witty quip and a perfectly timed explosion.
Perhaps. The enduring appeal of James Bond suggests that even in a world full of cynicism and complexity, we still crave the escapism and fantasy he represents.
Right.
He's a throwback to a simpler time, a time when the good guys always won and the bad guys always got their comeuppance.
Well, I don't know about saving the world, but I could definitely go for a martini right now.
You and me both.
Shaken, not stirred, naturally.
Oh, of course. It wouldn't be a proper deep dive into James Bond without at least one martini. What we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Bond is a multifaceted character, and his world is full of contradictions and complexities.
All right, well, let's get into some more of those complexities then.
Let's do it. So let's dig a little deeper into how Bond himself has changed.
Right.
It's not just about the actors or the goddamn gadgets.
Right.
It's about how the character has been molded and sometimes, let's be honest, butchered over time.
Yeah, like some of those later Roger Moore films, they got so cheesy.
Oh, yeah.
They were practically self-parody. Whatever happened to the cold-blooded killer from the early days?
There's a definite shift in tone over the decades. The early Bond, especially the Connery era, was grittier, morally ambiguous.
Right.
Later with Moore, it veered into humor and camp.
Totally.
Losing some of that edge that first hooked audiences. It's almost like they forgot that beneath the charm and the quips, Bond is a trained assassin.
Fucking right. Dalton tried to bring back some of that darkness, but I guess audiences weren't ready for it back then.
Dalton's Bond is interesting. He tried to ground the character going back to Fleming's more ruthless portrayal, but it quite click with audiences at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the Craig era that the franchise fully embraced a darker, more psychologically complex Bond.
And Craig's Bond is a whole different animal.
Yeah.
Brooding, tortured, haunted by his past.
Exactly.
It's miles away from the smirking, womanizing Bond of the 60s.
Craig's Bond is a product of the post-9/11 world, a world grappling with terrorism and the murky morality of espionage. He's a Bond for our times, reflecting a more cynical, disillusioned perspective. But even with all the darkness,
Yeah.
he still embodies that core Bond, the escapism, the wish fulfillment. We want to be him taking down villains and risking our necks.
And let's be real. The dude lives the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Fast cars, expensive suits, high-stakes gambling, and an endless supply of top-shelf booze.
Oh, yeah.
Most of us can only dream of that shit.
The Bond lifestyle is a huge part of the fantasy. It's about sophistication, luxury, and exclusivity. It's a world of heightened experiences where even something as simple as ordering a drink becomes stylish and dramatic.
Right.
Fleming tapped into a post-war desire for indulgence and escapism, and that's something that still resonates with audiences today.
Right. Even his catchphrases have become part of our cultural lexicon.
Oh, absolutely.
Shaken, not stirred. The name's Bond. James Bond.
Yeah.
They're like shorthand for sophistication and danger.
Those catchphrases are more than just words. They're cultural markers, signifiers of a certain worldview, a way of being in the world that people find aspirational. They embody confidence, self-assurance, and mastery qualities that are always in demand.
Okay, enough about Bond himself. What about the world he inhabits? Those exotic locales, the high-tech layers, the beautiful women.
Yes.
It's all part of the package, right?
The Bond universe is as meticulously crafted as any of the characters. It's a world of heightened reality where the mundane is infused with glamour and danger. The exotic locations from the Alps to the Caribbean are backdrops for adventure, adding escapism and visual spectacle. It's like a travel brochure for adrenaline junkies with a taste for the finer things in life.
And the villains, man, they're not just your average street thugs. Megalomaniacs with world domination schemes, elaborate death traps,
Oh, yeah.
and a penchant for monologuing. What's the deal with that anyway? Why do Bond villains always feel the need to explain their evil plans in excruciating detail?
It's a classic trope of the genre, isn't it? I think it serves a few purposes. First, it allows the audience to understand the stakes, to grasp the magnitude of the threat Bond is facing.
Okay.
Second, it gives the villain a chance to articulate their worldview, their motivations, however twisted they may be.
Right.
And third, it provides a moment of dramatic tension, a pause before the inevitable confrontation. It's a way to build suspense and anticipation.
Right. And they always have a weakness for beautiful women, which is where Bond comes in.
Of course.
It's a game of cat and mouse, but with higher stakes and more suggestive dialogue.
The sexual tension between Bond and his adversaries, often mediated through the Bond girl, is a recurring motif.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous game of seduction and betrayal where loyalties are fluid and the line between pleasure and peril is blurred.
Right.
But this also speaks to a deeper theme running through the Bond universe, the idea of control. Bond is a man who seeks to control every situation, every encounter, and that includes his interactions with women. He uses his charm, his wit, and his sexuality as weapons, a way to gain an advantage over his opponent.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until someone gets strapped to a laser table.
Indeed. The stakes in the Bond universe are always sky high, with the fate of the world often in the balance. It's a world of constant peril, where death lurks around every corner, and even the most innocent encounter can turn deadly. And that constant sense of danger is a big part of the appeal. It's a reminder that in the Bond world, anything can happen.
Okay, we've talked about Bond's personality, the gadgets, the cars, the women, the villains.
Right.
But here's the thing that's always struck me. For a franchise so steeped in Britishness, Bond often seems to be cleaning up messes created by American fuck-ups.
That's a sharp observation.
Yeah.
The relationship between Bond and the United States is complex and often fraught with tension. Bond is a British agent, but he frequently works alongside American intelligence, often to contain threats that have emerged at least in part due to American actions or policies. It's a reflection of the real-world dynamic between the two countries, a relationship marked by both cooperation and competition.
It's like the Brits are constantly having to bail out the Yanks. You'd think they'd get pissed off after a while.
It's certainly a dynamic that adds an interesting layer to the franchise. It speaks to the power dynamics at play on the global stage, and it adds a layer of realism to the otherwise fantastical world of Bond.
Makes you wonder if those MI6 guys are secretly laughing their asses off every time Bond has to save the world from some American screw-up.
Maybe they are.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just grateful that someone is willing to do the dirty work. But let's not forget that despite the occasional friction, Bond and his American counterparts often share a common goal: protecting the world from those who seek to destroy it. It's a reminder that even in a world of national interests and political maneuvering, there are still those who are willing to work together for the greater good.
Someone's got to do it. And besides, who else is going to look that good while doing it?
True enough, Bond, no matter who's playing him, always manages to maintain a certain level of style and panache, even in the most dangerous situations. He's the ultimate badass, a symbol of cool under pressure.
Speaking of cool, let's talk about Bond's impact on pop culture.
Yeah.
It's not just about catchphrases and iconic imagery. The dude spawned a whole industry of parodies, spin-offs, and homages.
Oh, yeah.
It's like everyone wants a piece of the Bond pie.
James Bond's influence is undeniable. From the Matt Helm films with Dean Martin playing a wisecracking American Bond to the Austin Powers series, which brilliantly lampooned the franchise's tropes and excesses, Bond has been both a source of inspiration and a target for satire.
Right, and Johnny English with Rowan Atkinson's bumbling spy like the anti-Bond.
Yes.
It's hilarious.
Those parodies and homages are fascinating because they highlight both the strengths and weaknesses of the Bond formula. They poke fun at the conventions while acknowledging the enduring appeal. It's a testament to the franchise's cultural staying power that it can be both celebrated and satirized, often simultaneously.
Okay, so Bond's a pop culture icon, but is he still relevant in today's world? Aren't those old-school espionage tropes a bit outdated in the age of cyber warfare and drone strikes? I mean, who needs a Walther PPK when you can hack into the Pentagon from your mom's basement?
It's a valid question. The world has changed drastically since Bond's creation, and the nature of espionage has evolved with it. But while the tactics and technology may have shifted, the underlying themes of power, deception, and global conflict are more relevant than ever.
So you're saying there's still a place for the old-fashioned spy, the guy who gets his hands dirty and relies on his wits and charm to get the job done?
Absolutely. The human element of espionage, the face-to-face encounters, the psychological manipulation, the moral dilemmas, those are the aspects that transcend technological advancements. And that's where Bond, with his blend of ruthlessness and charisma, continues to resonate.
Right, let's be real. Watching some dude type code on a computer screen isn't nearly as exciting as a car chase or a fistfight on top of a moving train.
Yeah,
We crave that visceral action, that sense of danger and excitement.
exactly. The Bond franchise, with its emphasis on action spectacle and exotic locations, provides a visceral cinematic experience that's hard to replicate in the digital realm. It's about escapism, about immersing yourself in a world of larger-than-life characters and high-stakes adventures.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room. The Bond franchise has had its share of controversy,
Right.
especially the early films.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking sexism, racism, a whole lot of casual violence.
Right,
It's
thank-
enough to make your head spin.
There's no denying it. The franchise, particularly in its early iterations, reflects the social and cultural norms of the time, some of which are now rightly considered problematic.
For sure.
Portrayal of women, the treatment of racial minorities, the glorification of violence, these are all aspects that have drawn criticism over the years.
Yeah, some of that shit is just plain cringeworthy to watch now.
I agree.
Bond's like a dinosaur in those early films. But hey, times change, right?
They do. And societal attitudes toward gender, race, and violence have evolved significantly since Bond's debut. While some argue that those early depictions are simply a reflection of their era, others contend that they perpetuate harmful stereotypes and contribute to a culture of misogyny and prejudice. It's an ongoing debate, and it's one that the franchise has to grapple with as it moves forward.
Even in the Craig era, Bond still has that bad boy streak.
Oh, yeah.
He's a killer, no doubt about it.
Hey.
And sometimes his methods are, shall we say, morally flexible.
That's true. Bond is ultimately an instrument of state power, and his actions often fall into a gray area morally. He kills, he manipulates, he breaks the rules, all in the service of what he perceives as the greater good. Whether that justifies his actions is up to each viewer to decide.
It's like they say one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. It all depends on your perspective.
Precisely. The Bond franchise perhaps inadvertently forces us to confront the complexities of morality, especially in the shadowy world of espionage and international relations.
But isn't that what makes him interesting? I mean, who wants a squeaky clean, goody two-shoes spy? Bond's flaws, his darkness, his capacity for violence. Those are all part of what make him compelling.
There's a definite allure to the flawed hero, the character who struggles with inner demons while battling external threats. Bond's flaws are part of his humanity. They make him relatable even amidst the fantastical elements of his world.
Right.
We see glimpses of his vulnerability, his doubts, his fears, and that allows us to connect with him on a deeper level.
Right. He's not some invincible superhero. He bleeds, he makes mistakes, he gets hurt. And that makes us root for him even harder. Because we know he's not just a killing machine. He's a guy trying to do his job, even if that job takes him to some pretty dark places.
Yeah. Exactly. And at the end of the day, let's not forget that Bond is an entertainer. We watch Bond films to be thrilled to escape, to lose ourselves in a world of action-adventure and impossible stunts. It's a form of escapism, pure and simple.
And who doesn't love a good explosion now and then? It's like a visceral release, a way to purge all that pent-up stress and anxiety.
The Bond films are masters of cinematic spectacle, delivering action sequences that are both visually stunning and technically impressive. They're a testament to the power of cinema to transport us to other worlds, to make us believe in the impossible.
We've covered a lot of ground here, but I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this complex and fascinating franchise. There's so much more to unpack, so many different angles to explore.
Absolutely. The world of James Bond is vast and multifaceted, offering endless opportunities for analysis and interpretation. Whether you're a diehard fan or a casual observer, there's something in this franchise that speaks to a primal desire for adventure, intrigue, and a touch of escapism. It's a world that continues to fascinate and intrigue us even after all these years.
Right. And let's be real. Who doesn't love a good spy story? It's a genre that's full of twists and turns, betrayals, and double crosses, and that's something that's inherently appealing to us as humans.
For sure.
We're drawn to stories of intrigue and deception because they tap into our own anxieties about the world around us.
Indeed. The allure of espionage, with its secrets, its betrayals, its moral ambiguities, is timeless and universal. And James Bond is the ultimate embodiment of that allure. He's the spy we all wish we could be, the man who lives on the edge, who faces danger head on, who always gets the girl.
All right, I think we've given our listeners enough to chew on for now. Let's dive into Ian Fleming's original novels and see how they stack up against those high-octane films. Just about to get literary up in here.
Okay, so we've talked about the films, but let's get down to brass tacks and talk about Ian Fleming's original novels. Those books, man, they're a different beast from the films. A lot darker, grittier.
Yeah, Fleming's Bond is a stone-cold killer in those books, not always the charming playboy we see on screen.
Right.
It's like peeling back the layers of a goddamn onion.
And finding a heart of darkness beneath the Savile Row suits and the shaken martinis.
Exactly. Fleming's Bond is a product of his time. A Cold War warrior,
Right.
operating in a world of shadows and moral ambiguity. He's ruthless, even brutal at times. His actions often have consequences that ripple outward, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake.
Like in Casino Royale. That torture scene, man, it's fucking brutal. Makes you realize this dude isn't just some smooth-talking lady killer.
Right.
He's a weapon, wielded by a shadowy government agency.
That scene in particular underscores the brutal reality of espionage, the toll it takes on those involved. It's a far cry from the sanitized action of the films, which often gloss over the psychological and emotional costs of Bond's line of work.
And those early Bond novels, they caused a shitstorm back in the day, didn't they? People called them sexist, violent, even pornographic.
Oh, absolutely. Fleming's work definitely pushed boundaries. It challenged social norms and tapped into a post-war anxiety.
Right.
A fascination with danger and the darker side of human nature. People were hungry for something that shook them out of the complacency of post-war life. And Bond delivered that in spades.
Exactly. Fleming captured the zeitgeist, the mood of an era defined by uncertainty and global conflict.
Right.
Bond was the perfect hero for that world.
A man who operated outside the rules.
Precisely. A symbol of both power and vulnerability.
And it's not just the darkness that sets the books apart. Fleming had a real way with words, a style that's both elegant and raw. It's like you can smell the gunpowder and the expensive cologne wafting off the pages.
Fleming's prose is unique, a blend of sharp, journalistic precision
Right.
and vivid, almost poetic imagery. He brings Bond's world to life through sensory details.
Yeah.
The taste of vintage champagne, the feel of silk against skin, the scent of danger in a smoky casino.
You're making me want to crack open one of those books right now. It's not just about the plot. It's about the atmosphere, the mood, the feeling of being transported into this world
Yeah.
of high-stakes danger
Yeah.
and decadent luxury.
And speaking of luxury, Bond's lifestyle in the books is practically a character in itself.
Oh, yeah.
Those meticulously described suits, the exotic meals, the expensive cars, it's all part of the fantasy. A glimpse into a world most of us can only dream of.
Right. It's like aspirational porn for the Cold War set.
Yeah.
Fast cars, beautiful women, enough booze to sink a battleship. What's not to love?
Fleming understood the power of those details.
Yeah.
He knew that by meticulously crafting Bond's world, he could create a sense of longing and desire in his readers. He tapped into a deep-seated human need for escapism, for a world where the rules didn't apply and anything was possible.
And let's not forget, Bond was a total womanizer. Even in the books, he leaves a trail of broken hearts and tangled sheets everywhere he goes.
Bond's relationships with women are complicated, to say the least. He's very much a product of his time, and his attitude toward women reflects a level of casual sexism that's undeniably cringeworthy today.
Yeah, some of his lines would definitely get him slapped in today's world.
No doubt about it. But it's important to remember that the books were written in a different era,
Right.
with different social and cultural norms. Whether that excuses Fleming's portrayal of women is a debate that continues to rage among Bond fans and critics alike.
So what about the Bond that could have been? I mean, Fleming didn't live forever, and there were all sorts of rumors about potential sequels and spin-offs.
Fleming's death left a huge void in the Bond universe, and there have been countless attempts to fill it.
Yeah.
Both authorized and unauthorized. Some were decent, others were, well, let's just say they wouldn't make it past Q's quality control.
Like that Colonel Sun book by Kingsley Amis. It wasn't bad, but it didn't quite have that Fleming magic, you know?
Exactly. Amos, writing as Robert Markham, tried to capture Fleming's style and tone, but it lacked that raw energy and edgy cynicism that defined the original novels.
And then there was that whole Thunderball legal mess.
Oh, yeah.
Which led to Never Say Never Again with Sean Connery back as Bond. That was a trip.
The Thunderball saga is a whole other story. A bizarre chapter in Bond history. Kevin McClory, who claimed co-authorship of the screenplay, eventually won the rights to produce his own version.
Right.
Leading to Connery's return after more than a decade.
It's like a Bond film from a parallel universe.
Right.
A rogue Bond operating outside the official canon.
Exactly. Never Say Never Again is an interesting anomaly, offering an alternate take on the character and his world. It proves that Bond is such a potent cultural figure that he can exist in multiple iterations, each reflecting the time and context of its creation.
And we can't forget all those unofficial Bond novels that popped up over the years. Some were surprisingly good. Others were, well, let's just say they made you appreciate Fleming's talent a whole lot more.
The Bond fandom is vast and creative, and there's a whole universe of fan fiction and continuation novels out there. Some are entertaining, some are downright bizarre, but they all speak to the enduring fascination with this character and his world.
It's like Bond's become this cultural Rorschach test. Everyone sees something different in him, a reflection of their own desires, fears, and fantasies. He's a blank slate,
Yeah.
onto which we can project our own ideas about masculinity, power, and the allure of danger.
That's a great way to put it. Bond's enduring appeal lies in his adaptability, his ability to be molded and reshaped to fit the times.
Right.
He's a chameleon, reflecting the anxieties and aspirations of each generation that encounters him.
So what's next for Bond? Craig's hung up his Walther PPK, and the rumor mill is churning about who's going to step into those iconic shoes. Any thoughts on who would make a good 007?
The speculation is always fierce. Fans and critics love to weigh in on who has the right mix of charisma, physicality, and depth to embody the role. It's a daunting task for any actor, stepping into a role with such a rich history and weighty expectations.
It's a tough balancing act. Bond needs to evolve to stay relevant for a new generation of viewers.
Yeah.
But change too much, and you risk alienating the die-hard fans who grew up with Connery or more.
The next Bond film will be a pivotal moment for the franchise.
Right.
It's a chance to prove that 007 still has the license to thrill, to captivate audiences, with his blend of action, style, and intrigue. But it also needs to acknowledge the evolving cultural landscape, to find a way to update Bond's character and worldview for a more diverse and sophisticated audience.
Well, folks, looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of James Bond. We've covered a lot of ground, from the gritty novels to the explosive films, the iconic gadgets, the complicated legacy, everything. We explored Bond's evolution, his impact on pop culture, the enduring fascination with espionage, and the allure of the secret agent. What a ride.
Bond is more than just a character. He's a reflection of ourselves, our desires, our fears, and our fantasies. He's a mirror to our times, evolving alongside us, challenging us, and ultimately entertaining us.
So, as you walk away from this deep dive, consider this. What does James Bond, with all his flaws and complexities, tell us about ourselves? What is it about this character and his world that continues to captivate us after all these years? That's something to ponder over your next shaken, not stirred martini. Until next time, stay classy and keep those martinis flowing.